It was a rocky journey, I have to say. I made a lot of mistakes, and I wasn't, fully religious at the time. I wasn't interested in religion in the slightest. I had a lot of anger as well. But I plugged ahead because you have to be externally successful.
What was that tipping point, during that rocky road where you're like, okay, now, you know what, maybe revisit that which I have abandoned?
That's such an excellent question, and it's actually going to come as a surprise to you. And it's also slightly personal, so I'll probably leave a few details out, but I think you can fill in the few details and you'll start to get the gist of it. And there was one fateful moment when I got into serious trouble, and I thought I had hit rock bottom at that point. I was 18, I should have known better, and I made a mistake that warranted me being exited from the school. Every principal goes through handling someone like this. Every parent is going to deal with a child making a serious mistake. I got called into his office, and he had another teacher with him. So it was 2 against 1. And he said, "We heard that you made this mistake, and this is kind of not what we do in the school." And I thought the next sentence was going to be, "We'd like to ask you to leave." But his next sentence was, "We want to know, as a school, what we can do better to be able to bring out your best potential in the remaining time that you have here, because you deserve it." That was the turning point for me.
And welcome to another episode of KOLOT. This is your host, Rabbi Hillel Kappenstein, director of the Columbus Community Kollel. And it's a great honor and privilege to bring all of you to our next episode featuring a world-renowned outreach professional, Mrs. Adina Stilerman. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure.
So, a quarter century in outreach, just about, is that right?
Just about.
Wow.
I hope forever.
Hope forever.
Yeah.
How did that get started?
Oh, wow, that's a loaded question. I would say that it probably got started, ironically, being disengaged from Judaism completely. And I think part of it has to do with the educational system isn't always set up for every single Jewish child. And I was someone who wanted to grow up to be an actress. So I had, didn't feel like I fit into the educational system fully. I also felt like I fit in completely on stage elsewhere. And so that's a recipe for disaster when a child is starting to decide what her dreams are and what she wants to be when she grows up. And some women want to grow up to be teachers or doctors or lawyers. So I think it started off feeling not fully comfortable in the classroom setting. So I think that when you're learning math, and when you're learning sciences, there's a much smaller risk for a child to not feel like they belong. Because if you're not good at math, then you'll do something else in life. But if you're not good at Judaism,
it's personal.
It's personal. It's your relationship with God. It's about your relationship with the community. It's also about your relationship with yourself and your self-esteem. Because where are you supposed to go if you're a little Jewish girl that doesn't fit in terms of being a Jewish woman one day? So I think that's where the seeds were planted, ironically, is feeling disengaged. The journey towards Judaism made me feel like I want to be able to facilitate these journeys for other people. And that's kind of how it got started.
So what was like the first official gig in this outreach career?
Well, I would say that it wasn't necessarily a gig as much as the first seed was planted that I wanted to do something different. It was actually interesting. In high school, we used to have guest speakers come. And I remember that was a cue for most of us who were kind of disengaged to make a beeline for the restrooms for an extended period of time when the guest speakers would come. They were usually rabbis with long beards. And some of them might have been very interesting. I just didn't give them a chance. But as I was making my beeline for the bathroom, the guest speaker walked into the front doors of our school. I'm going back so many years, but it feels like it was yesterday. And it wasn't a rabbi with a long beard. It was a woman with blonde hair and big blue eyes, tiny little woman. Can you guess who it was?
Young Grace.
Young Grace.
Her daughter was on the show.
Rabbi Young Grace came in. And I thought to myself, well, that's not a guest speaker I was expecting. So she walked into the very large auditorium. I was a little girl in the back. Maybe I was 17 at the time. And I said, you know what, I might as well give her a chance. 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and then I'll make a beeline for the bathroom with the rest of my friends. She opened up her mouth, and she talked about her parents being survivors. And my grandparents all were survivors. I never thought that there was anything meaningful about that. And then she kept me captivated for a full hour. And I thought, you know what? She's a performer. But she's not just telling a story that doesn't exist. She's an actress that's actually bringing life to life. She's actually teaching people truth, not fake stories. I thought, like, maybe I could be an actress like that one day that inspires other people. That was the first seed that was planted, that maybe there's like a place for me in Judaism. So fast forward a little bit of a lengthy story, having a lot of relationships with different people and spending time in Israel learning. I came back and I started volunteering for an outreach organization. In between semesters, I would run trips for them as a madricha, which basically means you have no educational capacity. You're not teaching. You're just making relationships and being a role model. The rabbi on the trip was Rabbi Shlomo Sprung at the time. He's no longer in outreach. But he was running late for the class. There was like a good 40 students that were sitting in the classroom waiting for him. And I was the only person, the only staff member. So he called me. I remember cell phones were so old, there was an antenna I had to pick up at the time. I picked up my antenna and I said, yeah, what's up? Where are you? He said, I'm running late. It's going to be 25 minutes. I need you to go in there and teach something. I said, I've never taught a class in my life. Please don't make me do this. I don't know anything. I'm not a teacher. But if you don't go in there, we're going to lose them and they're gone for the day. Just go in there and do something. Do a dance, tale, a story, anything. So I remember putting that antenna down and shaking, walking into the classroom, and I opened up my mouth, and then the wings took over.
Just like that.
That was the first class I ever gave. Someone came up afterwards. It's now 20, I think, hold on, I was 20 at the time. It's 23 years later. 23 years later, I still remember exactly what I taught. I don't remember what I ate yesterday or what my son's birthday is. My son's birthday is today. I don't remember the most important details, but I remember that because that was the moment where I realized that it's like where you hit your sweet spot in terms of your tafkid or your purpose in this world. That sweet spot is so nourishing. It's like almost as if you've been fasting for 3 days and someone offered you something to eat. It satisfies you in a very deep place. Someone came up to me afterwards and they said, how long have you been teaching? I said, for a few minutes. And that's where it started.
Wow. And what was the topic?
It was on Parshas Vayigash. I spoke about Yosef, and I said, I acted out the entire story. Each character, there was a stage, and each character I acted out for them. I wanted to bring it to life. Sure. And after I really created the tension in the room between the characters, with the brothers not knowing who Yosef was, I told them it just took 2 words for the entire scenario to turn around. Ani Yosef. Now everything makes sense. So I said that this is not just about the interaction between brothers. Often when we look at other people, we assume that, okay, we might be missing 2 pieces of the puzzle of their life, but we can get the general gist. There's a puzzle and it's 1,000 pieces. It's a sunset. If you're missing 2 pieces, you know the rest of the thing. In real life, when you look at someone, if you're missing 2 pieces, the entire story changes. Everything flips on its head. On top of it, you assume also your own personal view of the world. You assume that you know 99% of what goes on. But if you missed 2 things that God knows, all of a sudden everything makes sense. Even October 7th makes sense. Even the Holocaust could make sense. If you just know 2 pieces of information, you understand the entire picture of the world. So if you go through life with not contempt or judgment or worry, but a sense of curiosity, which 2 pieces am I missing? And be curious about those 2 pieces, you'll have a much more peaceful existence. And that's how I ended it.
Wow.
What are the 2 pieces that you're missing when you look at a person, when you look at your situation in life, when you look at God? What are the 2 pieces that you're missing? I remember till this day. It was a life-changing moment when someone touches on their tafkid. It's a point, a lightning bolt that goes through your entire existence. I don't think I'll forget it for the rest of my life. I got it better as a teacher since then.
Sure.
I've invested in myself, that's for sure.
Yeah. And you mentioned how perhaps as a child in school, maybe didn't necessarily have that platform. And then fast forward many years where you just out of nowhere, someone was running late. Hashem sent this scenario where you just had to do it. But what about the in-between? What was your journey then?
The in-between before or after that?
Well, from Rebbetzin Young Grace.
It was a rocky journey, I have to say. I made a lot of mistakes, and I wasn't, fully religious at the time. I wasn't interested in religion in the slightest. I had a lot of anger as well. But I plugged ahead because you have to be externally successful. So you plug ahead, and then you graduate, and then you go to study. I was in nursing school. So you push ahead and you keep pushing ahead. I would say those years were the years that I use as a well to draw from as I educate my own children. And as I look at others as well. Often before I start a class, I will think, and I teach adults now, but when I start a class, I think, what is the exact way I shouldn't start this? Let's start again. Can I give you an example?
Sure.
Okay. And this is where I think we can revolutionize education for all ages, because we're up against huge entertainment industries that really have captivated, not just entertainment industries, the news stations. They don't start off with dry, boring statements. They're provocative.
Yeah.
They really want to create an addiction within you.
Literally.
Well, what if we use those tools that Netflix uses and that the news industries use and social media uses? What if we use everything that they have and we use it towards Judaism? Can we create addicts? That is really, these techniques were created for a reason. Nothing is purely bad or good. It depends on how you use it. So I'll give you a great example. When I was a little girl in synagogue, and the pulpit rabbi would stand up and say, in this week's Torah portion, you've lost 50%. 50% of the people now, that's their cue to take a nap before the rest of services.
Yeah, you were generous with the 50%. But
50,
yeah.
Exactly. So the question is, what will bring them in? So if you're going to speak about this week's Parsha, you can start off with a simple change, which is, I want to take you back in time. Now, when you're speaking to an audience that mostly doesn't have a Jewish background, which is my particular focus, is most of the Jews that haven't gone to Jewish day schools, or, Jews who grew up in an environment where there wasn't a regular education or inspirational outlet for them. So they either have a negative understanding of Judaism. Maybe they were forced to go to Hebrew school, which sometimes was successful with the previous generation, sometimes wasn't as successful and gave them really negative associations.
Terrible, yeah.
And so I already assume that nobody wants to hear a word that I want to say anyway, even if they're a successful lawyer and an intellectual lawyer. The intellectual pursuit of Judaism is not really on their radar. So I already assume that. So I actually invested in myself, taking public speaking courses, understanding like the people who train TED Talk speakers. I've employed them to train me. What is a creative opening? What is a creative closing? How can I use these techniques to connect people to a better version of themselves? And most importantly, to connect them to God. So if they walk away and they don't even know my name, who was that funky short blonde lady? I'm comfortable with that. But if they walk away feeling a deep sense of purpose and rejuvenation as a Jew, I've done my job. Like another example, let's say, instead of in this week's Torah portion, or what I'd like to speak to you about today, these are all cues that often put people, that put people to sleep. Not to knock any other speakers who use it, because many of them win them over at some point. But you could say, raise your hand if you've ever been in a position where you felt that your identity as a Jew and your identity as an American was at odds.
Engagement right away.
Think about what that was.
Yeah.
I want you to hold that in front of you for the next 45 minutes that I have you together. And at the end, we're going to figure out what it means to be a modern American in a modern American Jew in today's world. Ready? Let's go. Now you won them at hello. And this is educational training that any teacher, an 8th grade teacher, or I work with young professionals mostly, anybody could really employ these things. Mm-hmm. I feel we have an obligation as educators to make it sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. Historically, it's supposed to be that way.
It was meant to be that it rests on the Jewish chain from Mount Sinai till today.
Yeah.
Didn't rely on God. There was only one Mount Sinai experience, and guess what he did? He made lightning. He created a performance. And he said, now I hand it on to you as parents and as teachers. Create that performance for your very vulnerable, impressionable students. And in the end, you know who actually learns most in the process? You.
Sure. Yeah.
In your preparation.
Yeah. That's a Mishnah. We're going to have to cut out the pause, how long it takes me to remember. But Mitalmidai Yoser Mikulam. That's where it's from.
Yes.
That wasn't too long.
Well, every morning when we, in Shacharis, in morning prayers, there's one tefillah, one prayer that is so deep to my heart, so precious for me. It's V'ha'arevna.
Sure.
V'ha'arevna, it means, Hashem, help me make things sweet as I teach it to my children and other people's children. Tzetzo'enu v'tzetzo'e amcha beis Yisrael. Every kid and every young adult and no matter, I speak all over the country, to all ages. I came back from Toronto, and the average age in the room in that group was probably around 40, I would say 50. And you see the same exact techniques need to be employed for kids as for 50-year-olds.
Wow.
Which they deserve that it should be such an enjoyable experience and that Torah should be sweet for them. That's the tefillah that I say every morning with the most intent, because I know that my entire purpose actually rests on that skill.
Wow. Okay. Can you tell us, like, maybe what was that tipping point, during that rocky road where you're like, okay, now, you know what, maybe revisit that which I have abandoned?
Yeah, that's such an excellent question, and it's actually going to come as a surprise to you.
Sure.
And it's also slightly personal, so I'll probably leave a few details out, but I think you can fill in the few details and you'll start to get the gist of it. And if there are any parents viewing this right now, I want you to just walk away with this one story and you can forget about anything. I give you permission to forget about everything else. This is the one story. Principals as well. Anybody who has a student that is impressionable in their responsibility. Okay. I was studying in Israel in seminary. I'm actually going to use his name because I feel like he deserves the honor. And it just shows you that not everything is about performance and education. It's about having compassion and love, which is not speaking about God. It's about being godly and imitating him. And there was one fateful moment when I got into serious trouble. And I thought I had hit rock bottom at that point. I was 18. I should have known better. And I made a mistake that warranted me being exited from the school. Every principal goes through handling someone like this. Every parent is going to deal with a child making a serious mistake. So I got called into his office. His name is Rabbi Sharfman. Are you familiar with him?
Does ring a bell. Definitely does.
I got called into his office. And he had another teacher with him. So it was 2 against 1. And he said, we heard that you made this mistake. And this is kind of not what we do in the school. And I thought the next sentence was going to be, we'd like to ask you to leave. But his next sentence was, we want to know, as a school, what we can do better to be able to bring out your best potential in the remaining time that you have here, because you deserve it. That was the turning point for me.
Was it like because you were shocked? Like you thought they would be taking a whole different direction?
Because it was an educational system that was based on real love and belief in someone.
It wasn't a system.
It was based on real. I would say this follows. The Torah is a story of people's mistakes. That would be the subtitle. If you look at it would say, you can call it the Old Testament, you can call it the Bible, you can call it the Torah. What's the subtitle? People make mistakes and they become great as a result of them. Mm-hmm. From Adam Harishon, from the very first mistake of Adam, until it ends with Moses' mistake, not being able to enter into the land of Israel. And what's in between? Mistakes. Mm-hmm. And the greatness that is the product of the mistakes, that greatness is something that most people who make mistakes can't see unless someone else brings it out in them and reminds them of it. So to be in the presence of someone that said, hey, you have so much potential. Can I be a partner with you and bring out that potential? As a parent or as an educator, I'm actually on your team. So when you make a mistake, it's my job to help you build from it and use that mistake as a stepping stool. That type of educational paradigm or parenting paradigm is magical. It's life-changing. One cannot underestimate that. And anybody, if you're a parent or a teacher, if you have a kid, you find out that they did something awful and you got that awful phone call, that painful phone call from the principal, your son did this in school, which I myself have received on several occasions. I'm a mother of 7 kids. So it's like, think about whatever you, times 7. Yeah. And they are very, very independent, outspoken, and honest children. I don't know where they get it from, but unfortunately, we have produced those types of kids. And when you get that phone call and your child comes home, what you want to do is to squeeze their neck. But what you're going to do is say, hey, I got this phone call that was so not cool, but I'm your parent, I'm on your team. What can I do better as a parent to help bring out your potential so this doesn't happen again? Because we work together. Like, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. Why wouldn't I want to invest in you?
Wow.
That was a turning point. I started going to classes regularly then. I started paying attention. I started really throwing myself into Judaism. Now, the reason why I said to you, why I thought that would be very surprising is because you thought it would be another Rebbetzin Youngreis moment where someone was sitting at the front of a classroom and kind of said something that would... No, this was someone who was able to reach from neshama to neshama, from soul to soul, with love. This was the Avraham paradigm of education. Do you have physical needs that need to be met?
The open tent.
The open tent, exactly, with doors that never close. That's why he was the greatest outreach professional.
Sure.
He did it through chicken soup.
Yeah, I was going to say good food, yeah.
Good food. He did it through chicken soup. And then once you create that relationship of love, that you show that you care about someone, so then you have, that is essentially the glue that will allow your educational messages to stick.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And this is something that I think we can focus on as a generation. Is focusing on healing those relationships between people that are in position of leadership and power, like parents and teachers, and the students and the children, to focus much more on the relationships, even though you're in a classroom with 30 people, it's kind of like a hard system to do it in, but it's not impossible. To show each and every one of them that you truly care about them individually, your messages will resonate.
Yeah. We had Rabbi Bender from Darchei on a couple months ago, and one of the, they have large classrooms and many parallel classrooms. And one of the things that they have their teachers do is before school starts, every parent gets a phone call. Like, I just want to hear about your child. Tell me about them. I want to hear, tell me some things that may work, that don't work. We're in this together type of message. Yeah. I want to know, I didn't prepare this thought, but like, you put that in contrast to consequences. Yeah. So sometimes consequences, they need to be there. How do you balance the two? How do you implement them without losing that message?
Oh, that's such a great question. And I often get that question when I teach my parenting course. I'm in the middle of teaching one now in South Florida. And it's rare that I have the time to do it because it's not what I do full time. But I'll try to do it as often as possible because I become a better parent when I teach it, as my children have reminded me. When are you teaching the next parenting course? You're much better when you're actively teaching the things that you want to practice.
Yeah.
So Rav Noach Orlowick actually says a really interesting thought that I like to quote because it has a good visual attached to it, which I think parents and teachers need visuals because when you're emotionally charged with the student's behavior in front of your face, you need to have something to ground you. because we know things intellectually. We know how we're supposed to be. But when you're emotionally charged, you're disconnected from your reality.
Right.
So he says with the reason why parents and teachers are given two hands is one to push away and one to pull close. I call it firm and friendly. It's the balance that everybody in a position of leadership should have is firm and friendly. That you're firm in terms of your principles, but you'll always bring them close to remind them that you're on their team and you're never against them. Firm and friendly. And so your language, your verbiage, your physical touch is going to convey that message of firm and friendly. Like, this is the line that you never cross again. But hey, I'm going to hold your hand to help you not cross the line again. And also, like, people make mistakes. I love you unconditionally. If you're constantly focusing on the balance of firm and friendly, he says what you do is if you push a child away at the same time that you pull them back, you have a child that turns their life around.
Say that again.
Ready?
Yeah.
You push a child away on one side, and then the other side, you pull them close. You have a child that just turns his life around. Firm and friendly. Now, if you just are pushing a child away, you've lost the child. So you need that added something to turn the life around.
That's interesting. Never heard it put that way.
The visual is very helpful because you have a child, like you and I are right in front of each other and we're interacting, and you have two hands that you're using as you're conveying a message, and it might be a message of anger, and you have to focus on what am I saying that's being firm with the child, but what am I saying to remind them that I'm his parent forever and I love him. And no conversation should ever omit either one of those.
Wow.
I think it's a skill like riding a bike with two wheels. It becomes much more comfortable and familiar as you get used to it. I know as I started off as a young parent, I didn't understand, and it was very hard for me to do, especially with someone who was passionate and anger issues, and I would want my kid to just come with a remote control. I couldn't find it anywhere in the labor and delivery ward. Had no idea where the child's buttons were. Didn't know how to control this child. And you start to learn that there is no such thing. The only thing that you can ever control is yourself.
Yeah, and actually, maybe that's the answer to my next question, but I was going to ask you, especially when you go to the outreach world, you're dealing with people, as you referenced earlier, that their perhaps first interaction with Judaism, it was downhill from there. So it requires a lot of patience, and having potentially some anger challenges probably does not do well with that. Talk about how maybe some of your own self-growth translate into success in the outreach world.
So I wear many different hats. I would say that when I work, I'm very, very passionate about parenting and marriage. So in the parenting world, I might actually experience, helping other parents train their children, and it could be very heated. In the outreach world where I work, it doesn't even exist. I would say even if people come with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, in 5 minutes you can actually show them I don't think I'm exaggerating on that. 5 minutes you can show them that there's a different side to Judaism that they weren't exposed to. Most people actually come with more ignorance than negativity. Most people are like, I had no idea. I'll give you an example of some of the ways I like to first create the problem in the room before I create the solution. I want to first teach them what they don't know before I want to teach them what they can know. I want to prove to them that the problem is there, and then they should create a solution for themselves. This is the first time I did it, and I've done it many times before. I was a keynote speaker in England it was a pretty large audience, maybe about 500 people in the room. And I said, and most of them come from the secular world, and most of them didn't have a Jewish background. And they were really such a beautiful, eager crowd. Really, like they wanted to be there to learn. So I said, raise your hand if you know who Jesus' mother was. Every blessed hand went up. Every blessed hand in the room. I said, raise your hand now if you know who Moses' mother was. I think there was like 2 straggly hands up in the back, if I'm not mistaken. And I said, everybody please look around the room. Now let's learn. Let's learn about your family history. How is it possible that you're a Jew, went through the system, you've done Shabbos dinners, maybe you went to day camp. How is it possible that you don't even know who Moses' mother was?
Wow.
At the very, very end, I actually answered who Moses' mother was, and I said, next time a teacher gets up and asks you that, someone's got to remember that name.
All those hands.
So I said, commit it to memory.
Yeah.
But it showed them that, like, how did we arrive at the place that we know more about our host country's religion and culture than we do about our own thousands of year old culture and religion? How did we arrive here?
Wow.
And so then hopefully if I create a problem for them, then well after I'm gone, they'll try to solve it for themselves.
You set the stage.
Yes. I want them to understand that there's a wealth of knowledge out there, and that the fact that they come with a lack of knowledge should create a real hunger and thirst. And it should also motivate them to make sure that their children are not in a room one day where someone asks them a basic Jewish question. It's a really important person in our family tree. This was their great-great-great-grandmother, or some of them, depending. But they should be committed to make sure that their child can answer basic questions about who they are as a Jew and what that actually means. So that drive of feeling responsible for the next generation is something that I impress upon them. And I see a very positive response. That's what actually motivates me. And it keeps me going every day, is the hunger that I see in the world of, I think, a world that many of us should realize that we failed, teaching them and guiding them, inspiring them. But the beautiful part about it is that whenever you see a problem, and there are problems going to be in the religious world and in the secular world, everywhere in between, there are problems everywhere. When you look at the problem, you say, wow, how can I be part of the solution? This is really exciting. Like you roll up your sleeves and you say, it's going to be a great day at work today.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel. It's such a positive environment to be in because they want Judaism. They want to be in the room.
How do you know that if they don't say that?
Because they come back. They keep coming back. And sometimes you actually get positive feedback.
Once in a while, yeah.
This was the best class I ever heard, or, I just want to do this forever. Sometimes I actually verbalize it. I actually make it my business when I am a participant in a class to go up to the speaker, because I know that that's sometimes what reminds them that they're worth beans.
Correct.
I'll do that because that's how I feel myself. But they keep coming back. In the department that we built at Olami for women, there's nothing that's bringing them back except for the fact that we're bringing real value to their lives. They're not part of a program. They're not getting paid. They're not going on a trip as a result of it, like Birthright for free. You have to do certain things. We actually intentionally designed an outreach program that will only bring people back, that will keep them engaged if they're enjoying the experience. Isn't that wild?
Wow. Huh.
We don't take attendance.
It's a different message.
It's a different message. It is one of the first that I've worked for in the outreach world that really we don't throw parties. They're not getting free sushi. They're not going to meet a significant other. They're not getting on a free trip. They're not getting paid $25 per podcast. There's nothing. And we have 800 women that are coming to learn. They must be loving it.
And what do you specifically attribute it to? If you had to really, this is what I'm going to prepare to make sure that I don't need to do a free this, I don't need to do a free that, but this is what's going to sell it.
So you're asking a really good question. I'm going to answer it on two levels. One realistic level and one even more realistic level. You'll understand in a minute.
Okay.
I'll just tell you a little bit about the department in Olami that I work for. I work for an organization called Olami. It's an international operation that spans across 29 countries with over 300 affiliating organizations that we try to service. And it's essentially the women's department. We started about a year and a half ago or so, this new iteration of the program, and now we have close to 800 women that are learning every week. The educational model that we chose, which we felt was the most impactful and life-changing, and this is not to criticize this educational model. We don't do podcasts, even though I think this is remarkable, and it's really about spreading messages and highlighting people's life stories. But we wanted to make such a deep impact on these women. It's the women's department. We wanted to make such a deep impact that we knew we wanted an assurance that we wouldn't have to set up the exact same program 30 years from now for their children, because their children won't need outreach. Their mother is going to be their educator. That's the goal. Deep impact.
Okay.
So how do you make such a deep impact? It has to be a one-on-one relationship.
Okay.
So we have 50 women that are employed learning one-on-one with all of these women. And I train all of the women, and I do all the learning material and the curriculum, etc. And I'll speak for the entire group every once in a while. But I know no matter how many times I speak for the entire group, it's going to pale in comparison to the emotional and spiritual intimacy that's developed between two people when they learn together. The learning material is that feeling of being in that room with Rabbi Sharfman. You're understood, you're valued, you matter. I want to hear the story of your life, and I believe in you. But through the lens of the Torah knowledge that we're discussing. Through this lens, what does this mean for your life? How do you do that in a classroom of 30 people? Mm-hmm. Customizing it to their traumas, customizing it to their struggles in their life, customizing it to the religious level? I believe it's impossible.
Yeah, I mean, every single person's their own world.
I would say it's not only their own world. There are worlds that come from them. So how could you not? Can I tell you one of the most brilliant messages that I learned only recently that really concretizes this educational model in my mind, and that's why I feel it's become so successful, why the women keep coming back?
Yeah.
So one of the great questions is, when you work in outreach, what do people need? Should we shift the message? Let's do a Netflix series. This was actually came to my desk. They proposed they wanted to do a Netflix series, and they wanted me to be involved in it. It is going to change the Jewish world if we do a Netflix series that's positive about Judaism. I was skeptical.
Yeah.
And keynote speaker, very large things were in front of many people. Let's hire this celebrity. Let's do When Hashem took the Jews out of Egypt, he did not do it in a quiet and simple way. He employed all measures of nature. He took all the laws of science and he flipped it on its head to the point that it was impossible for a single living, breathing human being to not know what was going on in Egypt. When the water split, every blessed glass of water across the planet, outside in all the nations outside of Egypt, all of that water split as well. He made the greatest impression on all of humanity. And that was intentional. But the most important question that I think every person should be asking is, so why didn't they all come and join the Jewish people? Like, if this was the Jewish God, shouldn't people say, like,
Amen.
Dump these slabs of wood, goodness gracious, that we're worshiping. I'm into that God because he knows what he's doing.
Right.
We only know of one person.
Yeah.
Who was that one person?
Yisro. Yeah.
Yisro was the only one that came back. One of the most breathtakingly beautiful commentaries that I've ever read in the entire book, and there are so many commentaries, was the following one. Why was Yisro the only one that came back when that light show was the most impressive light show in all of human history? Why was he the only one that said, I want to be part of that nation? Because he was the only one that actually had a one-on-one relationship with someone part of that nation, which was Moshe.
Wow.
When Moshe went to Midian, that's where he met. So he had a phone number to call. Mm-hmm. None of them like, oh, wow, that's impressive. And then they went and ate their sandwiches. Mm-hmm. And it happens like that all the time with inspiration. When you watch an inspiring film or a documentary, or you go to motivational speech, and you just feel like, I'm going to change my life around. But inspiration is like a cloud. It's fleeting. You can't hold on to it.
It's a spark.
It's a spark. It's like a helium balloon. Unless you have a string, you can never connect to it forever. It, by design, flies away.
Right.
But the relationship was meant to be the string that connects that connects the inspiration to action and to life changes. Mm-hmm. So Yisro had someone to call, and he said, hey, can I join?
Wow.
And if we focus on the relationships and even compromise the educational messages a little bit, realizing that it is that emotional and spiritual intimacy between two people that is going to change the future of the Jewish people, I think it's a very, very, very powerful message in general. So that's the department that we built. I don't remember your original question, but I think it was something along the lines of what you attribute to the success. Yeah. The success was, and it's a high budget program because it's employing so many people, but it's worthwhile because I think
maximizing your dollars so much.
Because it's the deepest impression you can ever make on someone is to make them feel seen and heard every single week, and to show them that Torah is the lens through which they can see their own personal circumstances in life.
Wow. Tremendous. It
is tremendous. I have to say it is tremendous. The amount of growth, the amount of commitment that these Jewish women have is I think it's a revolutionary program.
Wow.
The investment in Jewish women today should not be overlooked. I would say that Jewish women have a unique place right now, and you can't help but smile thinking about it. Knowing that tradition has told us that they have a unique power towards the days that lead up to Mashiach.
Geula, yeah.
Geula, women wear Geula glasses, that's what I say. It's our fashion statement. Mm-hmm. We can't help but see the world from a different lens because it's spiritually implanted within us. It's an epigenetic tradition. It's passed on from generation. It's changed us. And once you tap into those glasses, you look at everything differently in the world, whether it's global events, whether it's personal events. You say it's Geula. That's the message that I like to teach women on a regular basis, is that we have a unique way to look at trials and tribulations because of these glasses that were passed down. And I think every woman deserves to know where they started, who made these glasses, where did they come from, what is the story that has been passed down, and why is it that it's specifically the women that are meant to bring Mashiach, as they say, or bring the ultimate redemption? What is in us? So once you discover that within yourself, it's not just something that changes you. If we all discover it, every one of us own it, then you can't help but smile at the Jewish future, because you know that it's now in your hands. And that's a blessing. It's a huge blessing. To live life with that type of opportunity, it's a huge blessing.
Tremendous. Wow.
It is, yeah.
We could go on for hours, days, weeks, months, years, but I know we're out of time. Thank you for making the trip out here to the studio. Thank you to our production team and our editor, Gideon, who does a fantastic job with all of our podcasts. Thank you for coming on.
It's my absolute pleasure.
Thank you. To listen to all KOLOT episodes and see upcoming guests, visit KOLOTpodcast.com. We are also on all podcast players. Type in KOLOT on iTunes, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Podbean, and Amazon. Share with your friends, and please make sure to give us a 5-star review. KOLOT is a project of the Columbus Community Kollel, a full-time Jewish learning center in Bexley, staffed with high-caliber Torah scholars. Ever since 1995, boys, girls, men, and women from all backgrounds and affiliations have found many opportunities to connect with Torah and mitzvos at the Kollel. Whether it's a study partner, an engaging lesson, or a program, the Kollel is your one-stop shop for all your Jewish learning. If you want to know how you can benefit from the Kollel, visit thekollel.org. That is TheKollel.org, and forever be inspired.